Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hype Movie Reviews, where hype comes to die. I'm Schoolwriter, and today we're going to talk about Sinners. It has been quite a while since I last tackled a movie with such an amount of hype and praise right from the start. And Andor is considered a series, so it doesn't count. Sinners was recommended to me by a friend who told me she left the theater in tears. Oh wow, this is maybe a goodie one. This is one of those movies better seen if you don't know anything about it. So for those who stay, beware, some spoilers will be inevitable. Without any more delays, let's tackle this beast. So what is it about? Sinners is a musical, gothic horror story produced, written and directed by Ryan Coogler, who directed the first Creed and both Black Panther movies. Of those, I only saw the first Black Panther. Set in the United States in 1932, where the Prohibition era was swinging around, Sinners is the story of Sammy Preacher Boy, played by Miles Catton, the son of the local preacher and an aspired musician whose life turns around when his cousins, the Smoke and Stack twins, played by Michael B. Jordan and Michael B. Jordan respectively, returns into town. These twins used to work for the infamous Capone, and now they want to open up their own joint, to serve their own food and play their own songs. For this, they pull Sammy into their team, hire the local pianist legend Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, the sharecropper and bouncer Cornbread, played by Omar Miller, and Smoke's estranged wife and hoodooist Annie, played by Wunmun Mosaku. Sadly for the trio, returning home also brought up unexpected problems such as Mary, played by Haley Steinfeld, Stack's ex-girlfriend who is furious for being abandoned, the local remnants of the clan, or bigger and more mysterious problems such as the Irishman Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, who is fleeing Choctaw hunters. Visuals. After seeing this movie, I can say that Ryan Coogler has a good but uneven hand. Dude has a really good eye for photography, some of his longer shots and panoramic shots are really good, and there's a good juxtaposition of colors in several scenes. He also used filters quite well, for example drenching the interior of the sawmill in an orange-ish filter only to contrast it with the dark blue filter outside. He will take some time filming over a cotton field, or slowly entering a church, or an upward shot to show how big the sawmill is. The movie goes through the usual feral scenarios such as plantations, small old west towns, small churches and thickets, but it's not treated as expendable. But then out of nowhere there are sequences of shortcuts that seemingly don't follow rhyme or reason. For example, a simple conversation inside the sawmill nearly turns confusing due to the sequence of quick cuts, when some scenes ago we had a longer cut. Combat scenes are sadly not good either, quick cuts, spinning cameras and lack of coordination and cohesion typical of a Marvel movie. It's not as bad as Michael Bay in Transformers since I actually can see what's going on, but for a movie that relies on hyping the tension before violence, it could have been benefited from a specific action director. So I'd say that we started good with some bumps out, but good. Whenever Ryan Coogler cooks his own meals, it's quite good, but whenever he has to backtrack and uses tools of the trade that I assume he learned from Marvel, things get a hit. Acting. Now things get more interesting. Being a movie whose spine is linked to music, several characters are played not by actors but by musicians. This by itself leads to inevitably wooden performances here and there, but the directing wisely limits the scenes where musicians try to act and focus on musicians, well, playing music. And those are really good. Synchronization between musicians, finger movements whenever someone's playing an instrument, synchronized songs, singing, really good. I really miss good musicals. Now about the actors acting in this movie, I may have been tainted by Andor because I just found the acting here good. Not bad, nothing superb either, just good. But again, this is mostly a movie about a party being assailed by the supernatural, not exactly Citizen Kane. Michael B. Jordan did have a good chemistry with his colleague, Michael B. Jordan. Their acting wasn't exactly nuanced. One simply plays the face of the gangster duo and the other plays the muscle. But it was enjoyable. I do like that both Smoke and Stack have some vulnerabilities and they play as such. Stack is the suave frontman that dismantles into a heap of shivers whenever he meets Mary, and Smoke is the usual big tough asshole, but even he mentally breaks due to all the supernatural stuff going several times, and each one is well acted. It was crystal clear to me that Jack O'Connor was absolutely loving every single second of playing a supernatural Irish, and this dived well with the screen, especially since he had the chance of singing and dancing. He's pretty good at both, really good. And on a final note, Miles Keaton did his job well. Wasn't anything Oscar worthy in acting, but damn, dude has a deep set of pipes. He's a really good singer with a thick voice. I may check out some of his music later. Writing. Now, after the horse, the fictitious bloody meat of the movie. I've been purposefully scant in detail so far, but from now on I will keep the doors of spoilers open. If you're prepared to check this movie unspoiled, skip to soundtrack. Sinners is an interesting case where you nab an already done and famous premise of the past and give it a different spices and flavor to the point of creating something new. This movie is basically From Dusk Till Dawn, but set in the Prohibition era, and enough changes to make it distinct. It starts with Sammy barging into his father's church, covered in blood. Sammy, not the church. We see the poor man shivering from trauma, flashbacks of horrors that he faced, and we are thrown 24 hours before that scene. Honestly, I never got the allure of these quick flashbacks, especially right at the start of the movie. Audiences will know what's going on and who is going to survive, shooting some of the survivalist throws down. The first part focuses on presenting the main characters, building up the party of the Smoky Stack brothers, Duke House, before all hell comes loose. Characterization is simple and solid. Both twins are criminal jerks, but they have traits to prevent them from becoming completely unlikable. Smoke is the brutish, easy to anger and to dish violence, pragmatic in everything, but he deeply cares about his family, especially his brother. Stack is a smooth talker, able to get into nearly everyone's good graces and haggle good deals, but due to the lack of his brother's pragmatism, he ends up fumbling things around and biting more he can chew. Helping the twins is their cousin Sammy, the son of a preacher who hides in his deep love for music. He is quite inexperienced about the world, but deeply passionate. Annie is the one to know about the supernatural threats and give some gravitas to Smoke's violence, and Mary is there to counterbalance Stack's by showing his brother's softer side alongside some drama. Turns out they loved each other, but Stax believes that since she can pass off as white, even if her mother was black, she shouldn't be with him, lest her reputation be tarnished. All in all, a solid main cast for a horror flick. And in the second part of the film, these characters face the horrors of a hive-mind legion of musical vampires led by an ancient Irish vampire. Yes, you heard it right. Now, at first I have to admit that I was a bit befuddled by the villain, Remick. Having an Irish vampire in a Southern horror flick felt to me, a Brazilian, like a waste. The KKK is right there. Why not make them the vampires that seek to strengthen themselves with the power of blues, thus making an allegory of how groups of power plunder minorities to maintain an oppressive state? But then I remembered that Ryan Coogler did put a hell of a research behind Black Panther, checked by myself what supposed relation there was between the Irish and the North American black communities, and proceeded to feel like an immense idiot. Yes, akin to the first Dark Souls, the movie is straightforward. Party starts, vampires come in, hell breaks loose, survivors need to deal with the vampires, but things start to get in a whole different level if you know the details. I don't want to spoil things because it's really interesting to do some research on your own, but there is a reason why he was chosen to be Irish, from which the themes of the movie are developed in a nice web of influences. Sadly, said themes aren't delved into, just like the music, because of this movie's biggest problem. It stretched itself thin. Being a musical, a movie about vampires, segregation, racism, cultural influences, and more, there was absolutely no time whatsoever for any kind of focus. While I love subtlety, lots of the themes and ideas from this movie would be far better if delved into and brought into the sunlight. It didn't help that the first part went a bit too long, introducing the characters and the whole flashback sequence. While the pacing remained steady, the ending's quality got beaten as well. The vampires are ramped up to be a gigantic menace, but are dispatched with a mix of coincidences and script power. Remick only says 2 lines about his real motives, but even then it's ambiguous. And suddenly the movie's over. The biggest waste was the power of music itself, since for a movie that uses the transcendental power of music as its backbone, it only appears as the reason for the vampires to show up and uses it as a metaphorical Princess Peach. It's still the highlight of the movie, of course, with a really good long musical sequence spanning several musical styles. And they're always bangers on both sides of the equation. I still enjoyed this movie a lot, but I couldn't help but feel that other movies did everything better separately. For example, American Fiction dealt with the themes of racism, cultural segregation, and so on much better. There were many movies that dealt with vampires in a more straightforward fashion, and musicals full of bangers better ingrained with the stories such as Chicago. I asked a friend of mine why this movie got so much attention, and I agree with the response that was given. In a sea of boring by the book corporation slop, Sinners actually offers something genuine and enjoyable, even if borrows from several older fountains, especially since it borrows from older fountains. It does so out of passion to make a nice movie drinking from influence from the past, just like the music within it, not because of cold, calculated decisions to maximize profits. Soundtrack. Yeah, no, this will be a no-brainer. It's a musical with vampires which features a blues song with evolving rhythms based on influences of past and future, and Irish songs. That by itself is already good, but the soundtrack goes beyond and adds some cheeky reference to other movies and styles through riffs like adding rocks in the middle of a tense situation or playing with the different tunes according to the situation. Of course the protagonist has a musical number, and of course there is a villain song, and both are absolute bangers. I prefer the villain song, and I warn you to be careful when listening to the siren, because I ended with an earworm that lasted for weeks. And even me, who doesn't have much knowledge about musical history, was able to catch on the insane amount of research poured into this movie's soundtracks. Final thoughts. Yeah, this is one of those rare cases where a movie is both overhyped but at the same time it's quite good. To me, it's akin to an RPG bard or a duck. It's not especially superb at being a horror movie, a gangster movie, a movie about segregation and racial themes, but it's quite good at all of them at the same time, so I do recommend it. Especially due to the drought of quality flicks around. It's quite overhyped but still solid. Spoilers. Before I dip in, I urge you to do your own research. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So there are so many parallels between Remick, the Irish vampire, and Sammy. From a cursory research, the Irish were also a viciously persecuted people, especially by the English through the whole history, which already draws parallels from the abuse that black people suffered. In this movie, Remick escapes Europe's persecution in order to make his own family, hears Sammy's transcendental music and craves it, not out of pure malice, but because he wants to touch the past and the future as well. These parallels are especially drawn during the musical numbers, especially since, as I was told, the blues Sammy's played had Irish country songs in its blood. When it's time for Sammy's big musical number, he is the only one singing, but touches the whole Duke house, past and future. whereas Remix singing is with his own trolls, but at the same time isolated. He is part of the past that refuses to die and seen as more or less a terrifying but tragic figure, not by fellow characters but by the plot itself. It's repeated that those who are beaten need to be taken down, not only for the survival of the living but out of pity, so they can finally rest. Who hunts him? Choctaw hunters. And the Choctaw and the Irish have a long history of mutual cooperation through the years. And from this ingrained musical story, several other themes are drawn. The first and most obvious theme is sinning, where most if not all the characters are moved by earthly desires, but an interesting notion that I've noticed is that the Christian-based faith is shown here to not only take away the sinning, but everything else around it, including the culture itself. We have long sequences of people indulging in earthly desires such as sex, drinking booze, like Delta Slim, and smoking. You can argue that since sinning is part of the human nature and our passions, as soon as we take this out, we are also not human anymore. Sammy refuses to let go of his sinful ways and embrace his father's preaching, and he is much happier by it in the end. Another interesting thing is that, all good said and done, the Christian religion is useless.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come.
There is also the theme of family. Sammy desires to stay with the twins playing in their juke house, but Smoke even threatens to kill him like a jackass, demanding him to leave and seek his own path. But this isn't out of hatred, but from the wish to see Sammy have a better life away from this mess. This contrasts with Remick, who forcefully brings people to his family regardless of their personal wishes. Speaking of, these are some of the most overpowered vampires I've seen in media. Not only they are quite fast, can fly, and are super strong and insanely resilient, but they also have a hive mind and their bite turns people in less than 5 minutes. Even with the rule of no entrance unless invited being reinforced, they'd be able to wipe out an entire city in 1 or 2 nights. After all, in less than, half hour, they converted from 20 to 30 people. And sadly, these powers pile up so hard they break the script. By the end, you need the final fight, and since you have B. Jordan, you need to show him beating down vampires. So a legion of deadly, highly infectious undead charge head first, and instead of immediately turning these remaining survivors into puree, suddenly more folks show up from literally nowhere to serve as kind of fodder, and things devolve into a chaotic melee. Indeed, so chaotic that I counted 3 instances where the main characters could have killed Remick right there, but the show must go on, and he actually breaks his own rules about invitation. Which sadly also wastes the opportunity of using music more, since that what affects Remick affects the trolls. Could have placed them in a trance while the sun was rising. Annie is the one to talk about vampires and their weaknesses, but her knowledge isn't complete, which is a nice touch. She could have talked to Sammy to use music to draw knowledge from the past and future as well. I shall end this review saying that, yeah, the amount of hidden details to show their immense riches is staggering. I could make a whole video about it, but probably, definitely, there was a YouTuber or two who already listed the whole deal. I do suggest you watch this movie too. On a special note, I adore the detail that the vampire's eyes shine akin to the Blade Runner replicants, adding another layer to the whole shebang. And that was it for today, thank you very much and see you all next time.